and welcome to Power Culture Coco, home of the Coco. I have ideas. So, we're continuing our Madonna-Wh-re series. Today, we're looking at how women can internalize this conditioned complex to become politically motivated against each other and our shared human rights as women. We'll explore how the Madonna-Wh-re social archetypes are leveraged to mobilize women against abortion healthcare and our rights to self-determination through physical, economic, and social autonomy. This is a cornerstone of how patriarchy divides to conquer women. It seeks to condition us into oppositional camps, right? The two archetypes, Madonnas versus the Wh-re. And this is done to encourage us to compete against each other as threats instead of standing in solidarity for our mutual rights and benefits as men do. So this is obviously very relevant, especially as American conservatives continue to criminalize abortion healthcare, pregnancy, and set their sights on criminalizing contraceptives and no-fault divorce laws next. And to be clear, abortion healthcare is life-saving healthcare that any woman could medically require to prevent death through miscarriage or pregnancy complication. And as an elective procedure, abortion healthcare is the cornerstone of female autonomy and natural selection. No woman is obligated to produce and raise a child, and her choice not to is valid under any and all circumstances. No man is entitled to have children, and no man is entitled to use deception, assault, or state-sponsored violence against women to coerce a woman to produce a child or to coerce a woman into a situation where she is forced to provide unreciprocated care work to subsidize his life. Abortion bans torture and kill women by intention and design for the purposes of punishing and subjugating women into second-class citizens as a tool of male welfare. Subjugating women artificially elevates men, right? And so there are no laws that limit a man's choice with his own body or the medical care that he can receive. And if we did want to establish a reciprocal law to abortion bans for men, that would look like castrating men who commit sexual violence, like root and stem.
I'm game. How's it done?
It's a snap. I take my little machine. I take your little thing, see? I put it into this little hole here and nip the tip.
But we don't do that. And listen, while I see the merits of the idea, we should not do that. We should not seek to do that. The same way we should not seek to ban abortion healthcare. Enforcing it will lead to untold horrors that are counterproductive to the general welfare and well-being of humanity. Anyway, anti-choice indoctrination and all laws designed to diminish and criminally punish women's autonomy, all of these laws rely on the Madonna-Wh-re social archetypes to convince some women that patriarchal subjugation is not a threat. But the real threat, the true threat, is other women, the women who refuse to participate in patriarchal norms. You know, the Wh-re. So anti-choice views are not pro-life. If they were truly pro-life, there would not be a high correlation between people opposing abortion healthcare while also supporting the death penalty. If they were really pro-life, there would not be such a high correlation between people opposing abortion healthcare while also opposing mandatory paid maternity leave and child welfare policies like free preschool for all and universal healthcare for all, but especially universal healthcare for pregnant people and children, right? So pro-life positions are actually just anti-woman. They seek to curtail and criminalize the freedoms of women while asking nothing of men and contributing nothing to the material and emotional welfare of children. These anti-choice policies are about punishing women for autonomous existence and sexual agency. And many women are on board because they view themselves, however consciously or unconsciously, as Madonna archetypes. And they feel threatened by the existence of Wh-re who choose to build autonomous lives outside of these sexually restrictive and exploitive standards of patriarchal relationships. Limiting the rights of other women, those Wh-re, under the guise of pro-life bullshit is about limiting the sexual and material competition amongst women within patriarchal systems. Anti-choice women affirm their patriarchal purity by mobilizing against women's basic human rights, because on some level, they believe that only corrupt and promiscuous women, to the oars, are being denied abortions. They believe on some level that if they, a good Madonna, ever needed an abortion to prevent death from sepsis, from miscarriage, that they would be able to access one. And honey, my love, my darling, that is simply not true if you live in a red state. If you live in an anti-choice state, you will bleed to death in the parking lot, whether you are a Madonna or a to the oar, and no one will care, because that was the intention of the policy. If you're pro-life, you wouldn't deny prenatal care to a woman. An unmarried woman, a married woman wouldn't matter, right? If you were truly pro-life, you would never deny prenatal care to a pregnant person, right? Right?
I just found out that I'm pregnant again. I've been with my partner for about 15 years, though we're not married. I just had my first visit, and that provider told me that thanks to that act, they were not comfortable treating me because I am an unwed mother, and that goes against their Christian values. I'm lucky enough to live in a part of the state where I can seek care across state lines, and that's what I'm doing, traveling to Virginia for my prenatal care, scared out of my mind that I will go into labor and not be able, or have to deliver in this state with a provider who feels that that child's life is more valuable than mine. While we do love and want this child, I also have a 13-year-old, and I can't leave her behind. I call Marsha's office twice a day. I'm either blocked, or she has all calls going directly to voicemail. I've never even reached a staffer. And when I contacted Bill Haggerty's office, I was told that he's not obligated to listen to his constituents. Love that.
But this is a very real phenomena, the Madonna to the oar internalization. In our next chat, we're going to look at how this phenomena correlates with theories on evolutionary psychology that suggest people who adopt conservative, sexually restricted mating strategies, which is, right, that's the young monogamous familyhood, the young trad wife lifestyle. How people who adopt that sexual strategy are unconsciously motivated to politically oppress and punish those who adopt less restrictive sexual strategies. And to be clear, less sexually restrictive lifestyles does not equate to promiscuity in the sense of sleeping with people indiscriminately. The principle of promiscuity is the absence of any restriction imposed by custom on sexual intercourse, right? So promiscuity is that you are in total control of your body. You are not adhering to a custom, a tradition, a belief system that you were born into and have no consent over. That's not how you're making your sexual choices. So being unmarried is a less sexually restrictive lifestyle, regardless of if that person is celibate or having casual sex with different partners every week. The perception of promiscuity is not based on women's actual sexual choices. It's based on a woman not having a husband to claim exclusive rights and ownership of her sexuality. That's what's being responded to through these anti-choice views. So we're really dealing with Schrodinger's to the oar here. Whether a woman is sexually competitive and coming for your man, or she's celibate, or she's a lesbian, it doesn't really matter. The Madonna is motivated to act against women's rights writ large because they perceive other women as a seductive threat to their man's loyalty to them. Schrodinger's whores are sexually less restrictive because they have not restricted themselves to legal patriarchal monogamy, right? More so, and this is where we're gonna get into some really uncomfortable truths. The truth of a sexually restricted lifestyle is that within our patriarchal culture, that means that Madonnas are sexually restricted to their husband's on-demand use. That's what we're talking about. Because once that man legally owns the Madonna through marriage, Madonnas are restricted to being his physical and sexual property for on-demand use, not a co-creation of pleasure or intimacy. And this is why historically, rape was defined as a man forcing himself on someone other than his own wife. Marital rape was not recognized in a crime in America until 1993. And this was controversial. It was very controversial to make a man raping his own wife a legal crime. And hell, it still is, right? You get all these people, a man cannot trespass in his own garden. Bah! Gross, gross. Y'all are weird and gross and bring your kinks elsewhere. But, I mean, I just like this patriarchal belief that marriage means on-demand sex no matter what for a man. Like, that runs so deep. That indoctrination is so deep. And so, like, Ivana Trump, right? President Trump's first wife, she accused him of marital rape during their divorce. She later publicly recanted, probably as a quid pro quo to secure better alimony or whatever. But Trump is, a legally adjudicated rapist from his violence against E. Jean Carroll. So obviously, I believe Ivana when she said that Trump raped her during their marriage, intentionally and aggressively. But here to be clear, I do not stan Ivana Trump, but I believe her. I believe her. And so see, we can believe women we do not like or support in any capacity. Feminism. I believe in your rights as a woman, even if I don't like what you choose to do with them. But what we're talking about is that any woman, any to the or archetype who is not restricted to wife property status is perceived as a threat by the Madonna. No husband owner equals no man is present to deter the Madonna's husband from seeking to use the to the or. Like, this is messy, but it's true. And so this grants the to the or archetype the perceived potential of being a sexual rival to the Madonna. Even if the to the or is a misandrous lesbian who lives a life of be gay, do crime. Even if the to the or is trying to escape unwanted advances from the Madonna's husband. None of that matters. Because within patriarchy, we don't hold men accountable, we scapegoat women for men's choices. And women uphold and perpetuate the scapegoating just as much, if not more sometimes, than men. And like, we need to talk about that woman to woman, femme to femme, all right? It's a problem and we gotta knock it out. But Coco, why are unclaimed women a threat to Madonnas? That makes no sense. No, they are a threat because they have no husband owner. And men respect other men, not women. So this is why some men will not accept a woman declining his advances unless she claims to have a boyfriend or a husband. He will only accept another man's claim over her body as a reason to back off his pursuit of her. Some men, obviously, not all. So with this unconscious understanding, socially conservative Madonna types perceive unmarried and thus unclaimed women as to the ors who are threats to their relationships. So essentially, for Madonnas and patriarchal people, mobilizing against women's social and bodily autonomy is about making social independence and sex, especially casual sex defined as sex outside of legal matrimony, as costly as possible for women, not men, only women, with the woman-on-woman goal of sabotaging potential sexual rivals. Even if that rival doesn't want the man and is being like stalked or assaulted by him, does not matter. She is still a rival and a threat in the Madonna's eyes. And not just a sexual rival, a material threat. Because within patriarchal tradition, the Madonna is exchanging sexual monogamy for material stability. That's the traditional exchange rate, even if capitalism has eroded, the viability of that. So a potential sexual rival is a potential material threat. So we have a lot to unpack. We've got a lot to unpack. Like and subscribe for weekly videos, but otherwise let's zoom out a bit to look at the Madonna to the or archetypes at a social level. So basically these archetypes are how we are socialized to intuitively perceive and assign women to two categories of patriarchal use. Put another way, These two archetypes come to define what we perceive to be the two available paths of womanhood, the two dominant strategies for navigating this world as a woman. So first, we got the chaste and desireless Madonna mother. And then we have the sexually and creatively free to the or. The Madonna is pure. She's nurturing. She's a desireless mother who only exists to invest her creative powers into others. She is chaste. She is modest. She is sexually restricted. She is the resource that fuels the lives and visions of others. Her desirelessness extends beyond sexuality to directing her energy and creative potential in general. The Madonna does not seek to create anything for her own self, whether that's career, art, or an independent legacy of any sorts. The Madonna does not seek to intentionally direct her own creative powers towards anything that is only hers, independently hers. She invests all of her energy and identity into the roles of wife and mother, roles which cannot exist outside of the relationship with a man. It is a male-centered self-identification. And to be clear, not all wives and mothers are Madonnas, but when a woman exclusively knows and defines herself through these roles, when she only knows and defines herself through that male-centered understanding of her own self, then she's a Madonna. The Madonna is superficially lauded and praised by patriarchal society while being fundamentally disposable and exploited by design. Because the nuclear family unit is built on the backs of Madonnas. If Madonnas started getting any funny ideas about having their needs considered or their labor respected, protected, and compensated, then she would not be over-functioning to subsidize men and to subsidize the state without reciprocation. So remember, in America, we do not have a social safety net because women's unpaid labor is considered the only rightful social infrastructure. We do not invest in the basic welfare of children and people because meeting basic human needs is seen exclusively as women's work, as women's obligation, as a debt that women owe, that women must perform without compensation or reciprocity or any support. This is how we've built our nation. So then men in the state are entitled to rely upon women's unpaid work, to consume women's labor without participation, compensation, or reciprocity. So the Madonna's selflessness saves men from having to participate in care work, including caring for their own selves. And it saves the state from needing to invest in communal welfare policies like universal child care and development support. Go check out my series on the history of American childcare for more on that perspective. And side note, it's absolutely insane to assume that one woman can be on call for childcare 24/7, 365. Like, that's genuinely inhuman. No sick days, no vacation days, no time to take care of herself, and no structural support when she needs it. And like, another side note, I have so much compassion for women who have their first child only to realize after the birth that their husband or partner cannot be trusted with the baby. That man will refuse to get off of his phone to watch a toddler and make sure they don't stick their fingers in a socket or like just, I think that must be the most horrible feeling in the world. I cannot imagine the true horror of realizing that the father of your child is wielding weaponized incompetence against your own child. Like, realizing that your baby genuinely is not safe left in the unattended care of your partner because he finds it boring or emasculating or too burdensome. And like, to realize that you are alone in raising a baby for the next 2 decades. Like, someone make a horror movie about that. I don't think there's anything scarier in the entire cosmos. So the Madonna trad wife lifestyle is very vulnerable. She is very vulnerable for performing the unpaid and unprotected work of life. And she is highly disposable by design. So if after 20 years of homemaking, the Madonna's partner decides to divorce her for a younger model, like, she has little recourse. Think about it. If she forgoes career to start a family at 23, 24, okay. But then at 45, 46, her husband decides to leave her once the kids are basically grown. Like, What is she supposed to do? She will likely live out the rest of her life in poverty because she did not develop career skills or experience and earning potential. And without an ironclad prenup, most divorce settlements will not properly compensate her for decades of service and lost income. And the truth is made worse by the American refusal to invest in any common standard of life. Our viciously individualistic culture says that if you were dumb enough to do all of that work for free, you deserve to go die in a ditch alone. But also, you're a hut to the oar if you don't do that work for free, and God hates you either way. Woo! American dream for women! So good, so good. Always ends up in a ditch alone. Proud to be an American. All right. Okay. So, super precarious. But we also must acknowledge that the Madonna trad wife also benefits from assuming this role. And a part of the appeal of being the desireless Madonna is not having to endure freedom or the burden of social conflict involved with challenging patriarchal norms. Because the Madonna is working within patriarchal norms, where women compete to be chosen by a man, which is the bastardization of natural selection, right? I'll make a whole separate video, but a quick rundown is natural selection is determined by women and females choosing men and males who are fittest to reproduce. This means not all men and males reproduce, and some never will have sex. Like, that's the truth of it. But patriarchy flipped the script through a collusion of violence to hoard all resources under men's control. This enabled men to forego being selected based on merit to instead purchase a woman. A woman had to go through a man to access the necessary resources to survive. So women now had to compete to be chosen by a man, and we established culture and civilization on a system of forced breeding. Like, that is what patriarchy is about. The bastardization of natural selection and forced breeding. We are all genetically and in every way poorer for this standard. But the good news is we're really millennials are the first generation of Western women where this exchange is not mandated and women can live without men and thrive without men. We're the first generation after 5,000 years of a collusion of violence and systems of male welfare to ensure that every man could reproduce no matter how uncultivated or depraved or entitled he was. Bastardization and natural selection. But when we get back to the Madonnas, they're sticking by this patriarchal playbook. They're sticking with, I will compete to be chosen by a man, and that man will provide material stability in exchange. That is their strategy. And we need to understand these are choices and strategies. Choices. A part of the appeal of the Madonna trad lifestyle is releasing the burden of decision-making to the man's authority, relieving herself of the material and moral consequences of decision-making. And so, real talk, when you choose a life of material dependence on a man, you submit to their universal decision-making for better or worse. So the Madonna does not have to endure freedom by abdicating autonomy and the responsibility of choice, and she instead submits to the man's authority, and in exchange she receives material stability and patriarchal social status. Yay! What a prize. But also, the Madonna then doesn't have to develop the capacity for material independence up front. She does not have to figure out how she will adapt her internal resources to create independent material stability and thus independent power. And power is the opposite of purity within patriarchal beliefs. That's why men experience the Madonna Wh-re complex as sex without love and love without sex, as we talked about in previous videos. The unattainable Madonna is pure until she is degraded by the power of the man's penis. So powerful. So phallic. But all of that goes back to men's subconscious desire for idealization, to feel like a god. And they accomplish this unconsciously by degrading women that they initially idealize as pure Go check out that video for the full deep dive. And yo, if you have a problem with that truth, like, go yell at Freud's grave. Don't be in my comment section. I take that back. Go yell at Freud's grave through my comment section. Boost me in the algorithm. This comment section, straight line to Freud's ghost. He'll hear you. He'll hear you. Leave the comment. Anyway, the Madonna's trade-off is total dependence on a man to avoid the responsibility of developing independent power before procreating. And that produces the very real risk of future poverty should he decide to leave her, or, should he die. So, to obscure this very precarious reality, conservative social conditioning is designed to indoctrinate people to believe that it's a sign of women's purity that their work is exploited and unpaid and unreciprocated, right? It's a sign of feminine purity. They are unsullied by masculine things like respect and power and compensation and autonomy. So the reality of the desireless Madonna role, the young trad wife lifestyle, is very precarious. And the greatest perceived threat to their continued material stability is the hut to the oar. And so, on the surface, the hut to the oar is the temptress who enjoys her own sexual agency and uses it to manipulate men and corrupt humanity. She does not live a sexually restricted lifestyle, which doesn't mean she's boning every man she can. It means that she is not restricted to the custom of being a man's sexual property through marriage. The hut to the oar is dangerous because she is not a desireless resource waiting for a man to come give her purpose and meaning by making use of her sexual and creative powers. The hut to the oar has self-directed desire. Sexually, sure, but more importantly, creatively. She directs her own energies and talents towards manifesting her own visions, towards establishing independent identity, power, and often material self-sufficiency as like the fruits of her creative processes, right? It is the hut to the oar's autonomy in directing her sexual and creative powers that is labeled as corruption incarnate. And of course the hut to the oar represents corruption because she represents the humanity of women. That women are fully human, not resources for male use and profit, and not fantasies that men can use to escape their own selves and the parts within them that they hate and reject. So while the Madonna is the happy appendage of a man, the Madonna centers the man and circles him, only given identity, purpose, and meaning by her attachment to that man, by being the resource that nurtures without self-driven desire. The hut to the oar, on the other hand, does not function like this. So the hut to the oar is not excluded from being a mother or a wife, but she is considered impure because she is always a separate person from those roles. She has independent desires and she refuses to only be a resource. She refuses to perform modesty to soothe the insecurities of others or to absorb performative responsibility for the actions of men. The hut to the oar does not center men in her choices, in the direction of her creative powers, or in how she understands her own self. But since the Madonna only centers men, she is completely dependent on men for identity, for purpose, for material stability. And from that position, the Madonnas will always degrade, exile, or otherwise harm the hut to the oars to protect a man from the consequences of his own decisions, especially reputationally. Because to protect a man from the consequences of his own decisions by scapegoating and punishing a hut to the oar is to protect the Madonna from the consequences of that man's decisions. No, that hut to the oar caused him to stumble into sin. That man didn't break his vows of marriage. The hut to the oar tricked him. And now she's trying to emotionally manipulate us by filing police reports for assault. It's all her fault, temptress. So ultimately, it's easy to scapegoat the hut to the oar because she's independent. She is not enmeshed in patriarchal codependence that people find traditional and comforting even when it hurts. Or maybe because it hurts. I don't know. I don't know that side of the psychological spectrum. Not in that way, at least. So the hut to the oar's total independence and dedication to self is the root of her corruption, but also of her allure. Her independence is a form of unattainability, not just in the sexual sense, but in the egoic sense. The hut to the oar is unattainable because she is not subjugating herself. She has not molded herself to be chosen, to be picked, like the Madonna. So this makes the hut to the oar a challenge, and some men will see her independence as an alluring prospect to degrade, groom, or otherwise manipulate to try and get the hut to the oar to become the Madonna under his thumb. He will desire to lower the hut to the oar from a state of independence into a groomed state of dependence in some capacity. And that is perceived by some men as the height of conquest. This is why some conservative men prefer to date liberal or progressive women. Why some conservative men do not want to date conservative women at all. You know, the women who already share their belief systems, especially their gendered values. And like, this is why we've seen, I don't know if you've seen the videos that go around, some conservative men teach other men, like, yo, if you're going out and dating, say that you don't like politics or say that you're liberal. Like, they convince each other to lie about their actual beliefs. Like, pretend you don't like politics, They don't want to admit that they're socially conservative or a Trump supporter or whatever, because they feel entitled to still access progressive and liberal women. And really what they're seeking there is the conquest of, let me slowly erode her values and get her to come into line with what I actually want. And it is the process of eroding and degrading her independence to shape her, to change her, to degrade her into being the Madonna under my thumb that serves me. Like, that is the height of conquest in some of these guys' minds. And so previously in our last video, we talked about Pick-Misha of the ages, Pearl, and why despite loudly promoting manosphere vibes and saying women shouldn't vote and women need to go to wife school and like, despite like saying everything conservative and red pill men like say themselves, all of these guys were openly saying they had no interest in her. They did not want her. And that's because when wannabe Madonnas like Pearl preemptively subjugate themselves, patriarchal men lose interest. Where's the challenge? Men love subjugating women. That's the game. When they say dating's a game, the game is subjugation. And yeah, the hut to the oar archetype is a much greater challenge. She gives a better chase. And this is also why the hut to the oar archetype can be perceived by some men as the siren. She's magnetic and alluring and somewhat dangerous. Listen to this.
A siren is the most powerful female seductress of them all. It's a woman that has very powerful kind of sexual energy, but also energy in general. There's a slight masculine touch to them. It's kind of powerful, like a Cleopatra or a Marilyn Monroe. Men are very visual creatures. We judge things by how they look, and they know how to create this appearance that's almost like mythic, very powerful and theatrical. And a true siren, there's not a man on the planet who could resist a true siren.
Yeah, so the masculinity that Robert Greene is getting at there is the refusal to be used as a desireless resource like the Madonna. And that's where the danger lies, right? The hut to the oar is lively and autonomous and unpredictable. She is not inert and boundaryless. She is not a blank slate for male use. And that's what makes her a little bit dangerous in the like temptress kind of way, right? And that's the challenge, to seduce or coerce or manipulate her into a place of subjugation, to change her to perform Madonna martyrdom for him. Like, that's the ultimate conquest. So I hope from all of this, we're starting to see the picture emerge, how the mere existence of the hut to the oar archetype represents an existential threat to the Madonna's strategy, right? How adhering to patriarchal strategies, working within the patriarchal norm of submitting to the authority of the male through material dependence, will ensure that Madonnas perceive the existence of hut to the oar archetypes, like independent women, as rival threats to the Madonna's identity and material stability. Her just existing out there as something that could distract her man is the threat. Being unmarried, like unclaimed by a husband, And being socially independent means the H to the Or is a sexual threat to the Madonna, right? So married H to the Ors will trigger the Madonna's rage by receiving too much attention socially or something like that. And they'll get into frenemy, like combat zone socially. But it is really the existence of the unmarried H to the Or archetypes that is driving the political mobilization of Madonna women against women's rights writ large. So the fact that the unmarried H to the Or could seduce her man or be involuntarily pursued by her man by virtue of not having a husband owner to deter the husband's advances, like this is what motivates the Madonna to seek to sabotage the H to the Or in defense of her own dependence on that man. Does that make sense? I think so. So consciously or unconsciously, Madonna archetypes will seek to sabotage other women's sexual and material agency as a defensive maneuver for their life strategy. They will support political policies that oppress and harm women because they want to make it as costly as possible for other women to choose a different life path. And this is all done to eliminate the potential threat of other women as rivals. And how do you make it costly? You attack abortion health care. You attack and degrade women who speak out against misogynistic abuse and systems of male welfare, like the persistent gender pay gap. You do whatever you can to make it as costly and unsafe for women to exist outside of patriarchal monogamy. You make it as expensive and unsafe as possible for women to leave marriages and enact consequences against men's abuse and exploitation. Because Madonnas assume that they will not be thrown to the wolves by promoting patriarchal abuse of other women. And that mistake will cost many of them their own lives when denied abortion health care following a miscarriage. That mistake will condemn Madonnas to a life of poverty should her man ever die or leave her. So let's take a moment and pray for the Madonnas. May they find the strength to learn from us H to the Ors and stop actively seeking to make life harder and worse for women and children everywhere just to impress a man who would dump her if she got fat. So let's wrap it here. Woo! That was a big one. That was a big one. Drop a line in the comments. Tell me what you think. Do you see this play out? Does it make sense to you? Like, it took me a long time to like kind of put all the pieces together, and I'm like, oof. Just because like it's very foreign to me to like play women dirty like that. But thank you so much. You can check me out, like and subscribe, weekly videos. Next week, we're talking about the evolutionary psychology that aligns with everything we've established in this video. We got some cool studies to unpack. And like and subscribe, weekly videos. You can find me on TikTok at Coco Has Ideas. And of course, I have free articles up at paraculturecoco.substack.com. And I'll see you next week, my lovies.